So start out, tell me about the project you're proposing um, in North Attleboro.
Absolutely. So, it's been my dream for quite a while to open up my own theater. I've directed at high schools and in the community for a good amount of time, and I just want to take that next step and sort of throw myself more into the art. And I was thinking, like, where could we put a project like this that would, offer us like a nice big open space. And, I got to thinking about the mall as a potential good home for it. And the Emerald Square Mall has been extremely gracious in giving a space for us to work in. So the proposal is basically to take over an old American Eagle store at the mall and to convert it into a black box theater, which does not require the same sort of engineering or permanent building that a traditional like auditorium would. Theaters like this are, specialized in that they typically like are very flexible. So, I can have the seating facing one way, the seating facing another way, putting the stage in the middle, kind of lending itself to being really innovative. So that's really exciting. The sort of work that we're going to do is cutting edge, boundary pushing plays. The same kind of material that you see at regional theaters. I'm personally a giant fan of places like the Huntington in Boston, the GAM in Warwick, Rhode Island, Trinity Company in Providence, places like that. So you can consider us sort of the minor leagues. We're not there yet, but those are the places that I really, really admire, and that the people that I'm working with really admire. So that's sort of where we want to go.
Um, what made, and you mentioned the mall. Is there something about this particular space that really appealed to you?
Not particularly. I think it's more of just having an open mind about how spaces are used. I've some of my favorite theater that I go see is in converted fire stations, converted car dealerships, converted libraries. It's really just about finding a space that can house a theater and that, meets all the other requirements. Is there parking? Can you get to it with an elevator? Is it open? Is it an open floor plan? Is there foot traffic? Things like that. And the idea just came to me. I was at the mall, and I happen to know a gentleman that runs a like a sports hobby shop in the mall. And I asked him, I'm just like, what's going on the third floor? And he said, like, contact the mall and maybe they would play ball with you and giving a space. So it wasn't so much that like I had this eureka lightning strike of like it's got to be this American Eagle. It's more just like where can we go that would be able to house a project that doesn't cost seven figures, and oftentimes it's very hard to kind of marry those two things.
Yep. Um, do you have an idea in mind of what kind of a production schedule, how often you want to be doing things in the space?
Absolutely. I think starting off we want to kind of follow the typical model of a nonprofit theater and do a season. So announce all the shows at the same time, and kind of do a quarterly production. Interspersed with that, we'd like to also have a conservatory program where we can offer classes to both youth and adults, in all the performing arts. So the plan is basically once we get in there to kind of take one calendar season to get ready. So for example, if we can get in there, within the next month, then the first show would be produced sometime in the late autumn, late fall, and then kind of just keep cycling from there. So a fall, winter, spring, and summer show.
Okay. Um, what what other theaters have you been involved in the past? Have you been involved in anything like this before?
I've never been involved in the opening of anywhere, but I'm involved with a Common Thread theater company in Framingham. They're wonderful. They're a great community theater. I'm directing for TCAN, the Center for the Arts in Natick. And I also directed high schools around the area. My most of my work right now is at the school I teach at in West Bridgewater, so West Bridgewater Middle Senior High School.
Okay. Um, these the black box theaters, is this, I know it's not a new concept, but do you feel like it's something that's growing in the theater community?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that people are just being priced out of a lot of these places. Seeing like this project has looked for different homes, right? So I've priced out everything, and the rents at the even small theaters in Boston can be, $1,500 a week, which is hard for a startup theater company to achieve. So, the actual black box shape of a theater is nothing new. and if you go like off Broadway in New York, for example, you'll see a lot of it. What is becoming much more popular is the idea of, doing a adaptive reuse of a space, making it into a theater. And like I mentioned earlier, that happens with municipal buildings all the time. There's storefront theaters, which, are sort of smaller than what I'm talking about, but still in the same realm. And, sorry to go on a tangent here, but
Yeah.
I think that, one of the biggest predictors of success for a regional theater or a theater that's aiming to do some high level stuff is having their own space so that they don't have to constantly be negotiating for the church basement or for the high school auditorium. And they can actually kind of set roots down and have a headquarters where they can rehearse whenever they want, they can build. And so that's why, like this project has kind of taken on this form. Um, so like a black box theater, the great thing about it is the versatility. You can do anything you want with it. We could, if we wanted to, we could even take out all the seats and have like a, reception with people just standing and milling around. Um, so it's really, really flexible in terms of what you can do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Have you heard of one in the mall before?
I've heard stories about it.
Okay.
Like I've heard people say like, "Oh, I once went and saw something in a mall," but I don't know necessarily where there is a mall around here that has one.
Okay. What is the setup involved going to be like? You mentioned the black box theater is really flexible.
Yeah.
You know, what's your build out going to look like once you guys get all the red tape, get through the red tape?
Yeah, it's not really a major build out. It's putting up blackout curtains around the space just to make sure that light's not getting through when we don't want it to get through. And then it's just bringing in or building, I should say, some stage platforms. But actually, my plan is to use them in reverse. So we're actually going to have the seating on risers, and the stage will be flat on the floor. I've been to a lot of theaters that have that, most notably the GAM in Warwick, and that's just my favorite, my personal preference. So we're going to build some platforms, put some seats up. We're going to construct sort of just the infrastructure of the theater, just a place to run the lights and the sound from. But otherwise, like the area is kind of preset, if that makes sense. It doesn't need a ton. And it definitely does, and this is what I'm thankful for. It definitely doesn't need what you would call like a build out. Like we're not going to have a contractor coming and knocking down walls or anything.
Yeah.
Um, and you just have to be kind of creative too. Like a store has dressing rooms, right? So why can't those be our dressing rooms for our theater? You know what I mean? Like there's the back storage area for a store. Why can't that be where we store stuff? So I guess it's just being resourceful and just using whatever's available. Yeah, so it's not a massive build out. It's just more making little touches that have people kind of walking in and kind of forgetting about their outside lives. Because that's all a theater has to be. It's, a theater is any room where people can walk into it and forget what's going on outside of that room. At that point, you have them.
How many people are you working with to get this off the ground?
Just a few.
Mhm.
Obviously, like it's been a dream of mine. And I'm lucky to have a few people who are really eager to work on this, but it's not something where we have a group of say like 20 people that are like plugging away and starting this company. Um, right now I'm sort of operating as the one man band in terms of all the red tape and things like that. And then after that, when it comes to actually mounting the productions, that's where a lot of my colleagues come in. I have a lot of friends that are experienced in theatrical production, and that's where we'll sort of make hay with a bigger group.
Do you have any early ideas on what your first production is going to be?
I do, but I can't tell you.
Okay. Figured you might not want to tip your hand.
But don't want to tip our hand. But I promise it's going to be stuff that is not typically done around here. Stuff that the serious theater goer will have an amazing time at, and someone who's just getting into theater can go and kind of get immersed in it. Um, we also want to set ourselves apart. Even though we're going to be categorized in the beginning as a community theater because of our tax exempt status and stuff, we're not trying to do the typical like community theater fare of things like Annie. It's not going to be that or Grease or whatever. We're looking to do some what I would call theater that makes people ask questions. That's what I personally love.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are the next steps?
Well, been discussing things with them all. The next steps is just to get a contract in place, get the keys, and get to work. Start grinding it out.
All right. Do you have a timeline yet or?
I would personally like to have the first public shows, the first performances in the fall. I can't tell you if it's going to be October or early December, but that's kind of what I'm looking at is that time window.
Yeah. Any early reaction from the community now that this is getting out or?
I mean, yeah, everyone's been so positive about it. I really wanted to have a very um, clandestine, zoning board of appeals meeting and just kind of talk about it, because we're still in the talk about it phase, but everyone has just been like so positive. The zoning board themselves, people from the community, people from, obviously communities outside of Attleboro as well. And the media coverage too. It's like I'm surprised you're calling me. It's like this is, this is great. A theater project could only dream of media like this. So it's it's been thrilling to see how many people have gotten behind this already, and I'm really excited once we get a show together and put out an audition notice, and put out ticket sales. Like I'm excited to see how the community responds. I think we have something really good here, and I'm excited about the future.